Hello everyone and welcome back to the Little Goth Panda stream, and today it is True Crime Friday, and today we are covering the case of Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer. For everyone on YouTube, this is a Twitch highlight. The whole stream will be on Twitch, but for anyone who is from anywhere else and they missed the stream, don't worry, it's all here. So, like I've already said, Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, we are going to be covering the case of the Milwaukee Cannibal today. He is an interesting dude, and I would not recommend you eating a snack during any of this unless you have a very, very tough stomach, because this is going to be brutal to say the least. So before we start, I'm just going to quickly display the disclaimer for all of you, and I'll read this out to all of you at the same time. Okay, ready? So everyone, this is a true crime stream. No one is glorifying these crimes/criminals. This stream is for historical and educational reasons and to remember the victims of these crimes. I do not mean to offend anyone with this stream. Any money donated during a true crime segment goes straight to charity to help people who have been affected by crime. This stream may mention murder, violence, sexual assault, rape, and child abuse that some people may find upsetting and or triggering. Now, also one thing to also add to this disclaimer for today's stream, this stream today will mention, parts of it will definitely mention dismemberment. It will mention cannibalism and necrophilia. So I just want to put that out there. This is what this will include during this stream. So if you are not comfortable with any of this, I would definitely say this is not the stream for you. Jeffrey Dahmer was a very sick man, and we're covering this. To be fair, some of it's a freaking lesson. So yeah, that was the disclaimer for all of you. Now this is going to be a very long one. Very long one. Doing all this research, I already knew most of this information, and even by the time I'd written everything that I already knew down, we were like 15 pages in. Thank you, Hamster Cinnamon, for the follow. Welcome to the stream. I hope you are having a wonderful stay here, and welcome to True Crime Fridays. Yeah, so this is, he ruined the name Jeffrey for every future child. This is very true. Like, this is very, very true. There's a lot of serial killers who ruin names in general, and it's just, yeah. So, everyone, we're going to start off with his early life. We're going to go into his progression, his first murder, and then after that, we're going to go straight into all the murders themselves. Then we're going to go into his capture, his confession, the trial, and, spoiler alert, his death. Hey, Hamster Cinnamon, thank you for the follow, and hi, welcome to the chat. Feel free to voice your opinion on Jeffrey Dahmer. We'll get some polls going at some point as well to make you all feel included, don't worry. I'm armed with vodka and teddy bear and a teddy bear onesie. Now that is the right way to do True Crime Friday, I'm not gonna lie. So, starting off with his childhood. We mentioned the Netflix documentary thingy they made on him. They've made quite a few documentaries. Are you meaning the Evan Peters one? Because we will definitely mention that. I will mention a few of the movies that have been made about him before. Don't worry, we're going to mention like pop culture things to do with Jeffrey Dahmer towards the end of the stream. As a way of just talking about how he gets glorified quite a fair bit. So, starting from the beginning, Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal or the Milwaukee Monster, was an American serial killer, pedophile, cannibal, and necrophiliac who was convicted of murdering, eating, and raping 11 men and boys. Jeffrey Dahmer is one of the most known serial killers and tends to be one of the most used of an example when it comes to serial killers. The one with Ross Lynch. Oh yeah, my friend Dahmer. Yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the comic book. Yes, it's a comic book. So, Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on the 21st of May, 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in the USA to Lionel and Joyce Dahmer. 7 years after he was born, his brother David would join the family. Jeffrey actually had quite a normal childhood. However, his parents' marriage was very toxic. Lionel and Joyce constantly argued, which caused most of the time for Jeffrey to feel neglected. Lionel spent most of Jeffrey's childhood away and getting his degree, leaving Joyce alone to raise Jeffrey. By the time, Joyce had been diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety and was having constant mental breakdowns quite regularly. As Jeffrey entered the first grade, Joyce began to spend an increasing amount of time in bed recovering from weakness and just due to genuinely having depression. Lionel's university studies kept him away even more from the family, and Joyce reportedly worked herself into a state of anxiety over trivial matters simply to earn attention from her husband, because she felt, I'm guessing, felt very much unloved. Jeffrey is a small... Possibly. On one occasion, she is actually known to have attempted suicide by swallowing medication. Neither parent devoted much time to Jeffrey, who later recollected that from an early age he felt unsure of the solidity of the family. Thank you, Anne, for the host. Recalling extreme tension and numerous arguments between his parents during his early years, so he was present for a lot of the family arguments. He became man, fuck Jeffrey. Yes, true. Like I said, everyone knows Jeffrey Dahmer. He became very mellowed out after he was operated on for a double hernia when he was just 6 years old. His parents, now things with this, his parents didn't tell him he was getting a surgery done. They just brought him to the hospital and didn't tell him anything about it. He had no warning about it. He didn't know there was anything wrong with him really. He probably felt a bit ill and that was about it. And he probably felt a bit of pain. But his parents just brought him to the hospital and I was like, okay, here you go, you're getting surgery today at the age of 6. Oh yeah, he's a nonce. So naturally for a 6-year-old, that's going to bring on a fair bit of trauma that you're just going under the knife and you're not even aware of it. Also, you're not been talked through what a surgery really is. You just know you're going to get operated on. That's terrifying. The idea of surgery terrifies me as an adult. Can you imagine that at the age of 6? It's also been claimed that around this age he was molested by a neighbour, but this hasn't been confirmed by Jeffrey himself. However, there is a police report from the area about a 6-year-old Jeffrey Dahmer being molested. But if this is true and it was this Jeffrey Dahmer and there wasn't another Jeffrey Dahmer in the area, then he's probably just blocked this out of his memory. Okay, one of my boyfriend's crying. So from an early age, Dahmer manifested an interest in dead animals. He initially collected insects such as dragonflies and butterflies in jars, which is quite normal. Later, he collected animal bodies. This, by the way, when I say animal bodies, they weren't alive animals. They were all roadkill. Not normal, but then again, a kid being obsessed with just random bones that they find isn't the most peculiar, especially at a young age. It's at the end of the day, that's probably just down to curiosity, but then obviously it does escalate. I see I'm doing it this good. I will check it after true crime stuff. Bloof. Who the fuck collects dead animals? They probably saw it as curiosity because he was obsessed with bones. So, yeah, he collected animal bodies. He dismembered these animals either at home or in a nearby woodland. His fascination with dead animals began at the age of 4. He saw his father removing animal bones from beneath the family home. According to Lionel, Dahmer was oddly thrilled by the sound that the bones made and became preoccupied with animal bones. He occasionally searched beneath and around the family home for additional bones, and he also explored the bodies of live animals to discover where their bones were located. So basically, he just wanted to know how the animals worked. So far, it reminds me of an alias. Yeah, pretty much. But when I was young, I used to shoot my pellet gun at birds. Kids are weird, especially at a young age when they've not been taught right from wrong. They've not been taught stuff like this. The kids gain weird interest. So right now it's fairly innocent, but obviously it does escalate. In one instance, Dahmer, now this one is weird. This is when it escalates. So at one point, Dahmer found the dead body of a dog, and he decapitated the dog before nailing the body to a tree and impaling the skull on a stake beside a wooden cross in the woodland behind his house. See, that's when it gets fucking weird. He probably just would have been a biologist at one point in his life and just would have had a weird kink for some things. Probably would have just stuck with a mannequin. Probably would have just stuck with the fake skeleton that they get in the lessons. They probably would have just stuck with that, but no. So in October 1966, the family moved to Doylestown, Ohio, where Joyce gave birth in December. Jeffrey was allowed to choose the name of his younger brother. Normal. The same year, Lionel earned his degree and started work as an analytical chemist in nearby Akron, Ohio. I saw someone with the same hair as you say, that's quite normal. A lot of people have this hair. It's not really, unusual, I guess. I see a lot of people with this hair. In 1968, the family moved to Bath Township, Summit County, Ohio. 2 years later, during a chicken dinner, Dahmer asked his dad what would happen if the chicken bones were placed in bleach. Lionel actually kind of just thought that his son is gaining an interest in what he does as a chemist. So he was like, oh, I'll just show you. And he showed him how to safely bleach and preserve animal bones. However, this is what Dahmer would eventually do to human bones later on in life. So his father has, without knowing, taught his son his own technique. So the same year, Joyce also began increasing her daily consumption of Equinil, laxatives, and sleeping pills, further minimizing her tangible contact with her husband and children. So she spent most of the time in bed. Always starts from animal, Scarlet, correct? So then he went on to his freshman year at Revere High School. He was a bit of an outcast. He was a keen tennis player and played briefly in the high school band. But by the time he was 14 years old, he was already a major alcoholic. So he would actually bring a bottle of gin to school with him and put it in his locker. And then he'd just put gin and whichever mixer he had into a styrofoam cup and just drink it throughout the day. And when people would ask him, like, oh, what are you drinking? He'd just go, my medicine. Edgy. So he didn't exactly have any friends, but he also wasn't unpopular in school either. He was mostly a class clown in school, occasionally acting weird on purpose and doing stupid things throughout the day to pretty much just make people laugh, as his classmates would end up eventually calling his actions doing a Dahmer. Sometimes he would pretend to have different disabilities in order to make people in school laugh. So he'd pretend to have like epilepsy and pretend to have seizures, which is not cool, but that's what he thought was funny. No, he's just drinking gin. His classmates liked him, but most have been interviewed since his arrest, and they said that they weren't actually surprised that he went to this point in life. They said that they thought that another pupil that they were friends with would be a serial killer and that he was their second guess. So let's hope that the first one's not done anything and gotten the help, I guess. They also said that they think at some point in the future, Dahmer would have had a mental breakdown and ended up either killing himself or someone else. When he reached puberty, he realized that he was gay. He kept this information from his parents due to the time that everyone lived in. Can we get these wannabe famous things blocked, please? And banned. So yeah, when he reached puberty, he realized he was gay. He kept this information from his parents just due to being gay wasn't allowed at the time. He recalls the moment he realized he was gay and said that he was best to keep it hush hush, as he puts it. When he was 16, Dahmer conceived a fantasy of rendering an unconscious man to lay next to him. So basically, he wanted to lie next to an unconscious guy. So this was around the time he became obsessed with a particular jogger that used to go past his house at the same time every single day. He found him pretty attractive, and on one occasion, for a while, he was contemplating just knocking him unconscious and lying down next to him, but he kept on putting the idea off until one day he actually tried to go through with it. He hid in a bush with a baseball bat, ready for the jogger to run past, but luckily the jogger actually didn't run past that day, and Jeffrey never tried it again. In 1977, Dahmer's grades had gotten really, really bad. Do you think that people do what they do because people hating on their sexuality? No. Definitely not, because otherwise there'd be... No, that definitely fucking not. No fucking way. So, yeah, his grades have kind of gone, aggressive, continually worse. His parents hired a private tutor, which didn't have any success at all. The same year, in an attempt to save their marriage, his parents attended counselling sessions. They continued to argue quite a lot. It didn't save anything. When Lionel discovered Joyce had engaged in a brief affair in September 1977, they both decided to finally divorce, telling their sons they wished to do very calmly. Have I missed it? No! We've just started. We're just on his childhood right now. So Lionel moved out of the house in early 1978. For now, he lived in a motel on North Cleveland, Malleson Road. Yeah, another road. I did my research. In May 1978, Dahmer graduated from high school. A few weeks before his graduation, one of his teachers saw Dahmer sitting close to the school parking lot, drinking several cans of beer. He'd gotten a quarter way through a 12-pack. Dahmer, fame of mine. You'll quite enjoy this. I did a lot of freaking research. It's killed me off. When the teacher threatened to report the fact that Dahmer was drinking on school campus, Dahmer informed him that he was experiencing a lot of problems at home and that the school's guidance counselor was aware of them. That spring, Joyce and David moved out of the family home to live with family in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin. Dahmer had just turned 18 and remained in the family home. His parents' divorce was finalized on the 24th of July 1978, and Joyce was given custody of her younger son and alimony payments. Now, the thing is, Lionel had moved out briefly in a motel for a while. Joyce had also left, but she had left about a few months after Lionel did. Lionel had no idea that Joyce had just abandoned their 18-year-old son in the house on his own without any notice. Jeffrey didn't know his parents had just moved out. He just kind of came home one day and saw that they both weren't there and clearly weren't coming back. Despite being a bit of an outcast, Dahmer went to prom, actually, with a girl from his class named Bridget Geiner. I just came here because I'm on a sleepover and I don't feel safe at all. Don't worry. Milk, you are fine here. So, Bridget says that her first date was with Jeffrey Dahmer, who took her to the Revere High School prom. She was 16 and he was 18 in 1978. Bridget said that he was polite and courteous, but somewhat aloof. She said that he asked her to be his date because her best friend dated Dahmer's best friend at the time. Bet she regrets that. Probably. Now, she says that he was scared to death of girls. He was scared to death that she was going to kiss him. Bridget said that it was sometime after prom in June 1978 that she was invited to a house party at Dahmer's home. She said there was no music, no food or drinks. It was a nerd party, and there were 7 people at the whole thing. She said Dahmer and a friend called for a seance, and then after they sat down and were situated, the lights went out, and one of the kids, not Dahmer, said, "Let's call Lucifer, let the flame and the candles snap." She was so scared she ran away from the house and didn't hear or see from Dahmer ever again. And this was the only relationship he ever had with a woman because he was gay. So this is when we go to the first ever murder. Jeffrey Dahmer's first murder. His first victim was called Stephen Hicks. So Dahmer committed his first murder in 1978, 3 weeks after his graduation. At the time, he was living alone in his family home in Bath. On the 18th of June, Dahmer picked up a hitchhiker called Stephen Mark Hicks, who was almost 19 years old. Dahmer was driving down the street when finally leaving the house to go to the cinema. He saw 19-year-old Stephen hitchhiking on the road, and he pulled over and offered Stephen a ride. Stephen had been heading to a rock concert in Chippewa Lake Park, and he had some time before the concert started, and Dahmer had offered to drive him the entire way. But he also said, "We've got some time to kill, why don't we go back to my place, my parents aren't home, and we can have a few beers and just chill out for a bit." Stephen agreed, and they went back to his place. Now, according to Dahmer, the sight of the bare-chested, so it was quite hot, so he had his shirt off, and Dahmer said the sight of the bare-chested Hicks standing at the roadside stirred his sexual feelings. Although, when they went back to Dahmer's place, Stephen started talking about a bunch of girls that he liked, what his type was, and his current girlfriend. Time to kill. Well, yeah, true. So, yeah, he started talking about his girlfriend, and Dahmer knew that any sexual passes he made would be rejected straight up. And after several hours of talking, drinking, and listening to music, Stephen wanted to leave. He needed to get to his concert, but Dahmer didn't want him to go. So, out of the blue, Stephen didn't do anything. He didn't anger Jeffrey. All he said is that he needs to get to the concert, so he needs to go, and that he appreciates the time that they've had talking. So, in response to this, Jeffrey bludgeoned Hicks with a 10-pound dumbbell. He later stated that he struck Hicks twice from behind with the dumbbell as Hicks sat in the chair. When he fell unconscious, Dahmer strangled him to death with the bar of the dumbbell, then stripped the clothes from his body before exploring his chest with his hands. He then... Yeah, probably the girlfriend comment. He then masturbated over the body, and the next day, Dahmer dissected Hicks's body in his basement. He later buried the remains in a shallow grave in his backyard, but several weeks later, he redug up the remains and got rid of the flesh from the bones. He dissolved the flesh in acid before flushing it all down the toilet. He crushed the bones with a sledgehammer and scattered them in the woodland behind the family home. That's his first fucking murder. That's the first one. So 6 weeks later, after the murder of Stephen Hicks, Lionel returns to the home with his new fiancée. You know what? I've always wondered, what gig was he going to see? So, Lionel came back home with his new fiancée, where they discovered that Jeffrey had been living alone in the house, that he had no food in, he hadn't washed, the complete place was a mess. He also realised Jeffrey was a raging alcoholic. That August, Jeffrey enrolled in Ohio State University, hoping to major in business. His sole term at Ohio State was completely unproductive, largely because of his alcohol abuse. Throughout the majority of the term, he failed all of his classes in Introduction to Anthropology, Classic Civilizations, and Administrative Science. The only course that he was kind of good at was riflery. After receiving a B- grade, his overall GPA was a 0.45 and 4.0. On one occasion, Lionel paid a surprise visit to his son, only to find out his room was covered in liquor bottles. Despite his father having paid in advance for the second term, Dahmer dropped out of Ohio State after just 3 months. Now people realize he's an alcoholic. Yeah, it's about time, right? In January 1979, on his father's urging, Jeffrey enlisted in the United States Army, where he trained as a medical specialist at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas. On the 13th of July 1979, he was deployed to Baumholder, West Germany, where he served as a combat medic in the 2nd Battalion? 68th Armored Regiment, 8th Infantry Division. According to published reports, in Dahmer's first year of service, he was an average of slightly above average soldier. Pretty much no, he only just was like, oh, my son has been left here on his own, his mother's fucked off, and he's an alcoholic. And that's all Lionel really noticed. Yeah. So, because of Jeffrey's alcohol abuse, his performance deteriorated, and in March 1981, he was deemed unsuitable for military service and was later discharged from the army. He received an honourable discharge as his superiors did not believe that any problems Dahmer had in the army would be applicable to civilian life. So on the 24th of March 1981, Dahmer was sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for debriefing and provided with a plane ticket to travel anywhere that he wants in the country. Dahmer later told police that he felt like he couldn't return home to face his father, so he opted to travel to Miami Beach, Florida, both because he was tired of the cold and in an attempt to live by his own means. In Florida, Dahmer found a job at he pretty much just found a job at a sandwich shop. It wasn't really anything big. He rented a room in a nearby motel, and he spent most of his salary on alcohol and was soon evicted from the motel for not really paying. And he spent the rest of his he ended up spending his evenings on the beach. So he just slept on the beach, and he continued to work at the sandwich shop until phoning his father and asking to return to Ohio in September of that year. Now, the reason why he decided to pluck up the courage and actually ring his dad is because he was laying on the beach at night and a rat ran over his foot, and he was like, nah, I'm done. And I'm not taking the piss, that's actually true. After his return to Ohio, he ended up living with his father and stepmother and insisted on being delegated numerous chores to occupy his time while he looked for work. He continued to drink really, really heavily, and 2 weeks after he returned home, he was arrested for drunk and disorderly conduct, and he was fined $60 and given a suspended 10-day jail sentence. His father tried and unsuccessfully to get him off alcohol, but in December 1981, Lionel and his new wife sent Jeffrey to go live with his grandmother in West Allis, Wisconsin. Now, Jeffrey's grandma was apparently one of the only person who was happy to take him in. She absolutely adored him. She was the only one that actually paid him any attention and gave him any affection throughout his entire life. So they hope that under this and her influence and the change of scenery that they might actually help him stop drinking, find a job, and actually start off a normal life. But his time with his grandma at first was actually pretty decent. Like, he went with her to church, he willingly did the chores, he actively sought out work, and he actually listened to all of her house rules, other than the drinking and the smoking, which he still carried on doing. Now, it's actually brought results. His life was getting back, like, pretty much on track. And in early 1982, he found a job as he found a job at a blood plasma center. It's just a pretty much average job where he just worked and helped out every now and again. He had this job for a total of 10 months before being laid off, and he remained unemployed for over 2 years after this. During this time, he lived upon whatever his money that his grandmother basically gave him, kind of like an allowance. So after he lost his job, Dahmer was arrested for indecent... He was arrested for indecent exposure, and on the 7th of August 1982, at a Wisconsin State Fair park, he was observed to expose himself on the south side of the Coliseum, in which 25 people were present, including women and children. Now, this meant that he ended up being convicted and fined $50 plus court cost, which is fucking nothing. In January 1985, Dahmer was hired as a mixer at the Milwaukee Cannibal chocolate factory, where he worked from 11 p.m. till 7 a.m., 6 nights per week, with Saturday evening off. That would make me want to kill myself, but you know what, Jeffrey, fair enough. Shortly after this, he found this job okay. He felt like it was just an average job. But not too long after he started, an accident occurred in which he... Yeah. So, after the words, fucking hell. Not too long after he had this job, he was at the West Alice Public Library, and a stranger walked past him and gave him a note which offered to give Jeffrey a blowjob in the toilets, basically. Now, Jeffrey he contemplated it, but then decided just to not do it. Yeah, exactly, kinky. Now, the offer stirred his mind. It basically just stirred his mind up, and the fantasies of control and dominance he had as a teenager begun to come back. So he decided to basically explore his sexuality a bit. So he went out into Milwaukee's popular gay bars, gay bathhouses, and bookstores. If you don't know what a bathhouse is, does anyone know what a bathhouse is before I go and tell you what it is? Basically, you bang. You basically bang. Basically have a lot of sex. That's basically it. Meet there, you bang. Basic. So, around this, it's like, not like a brothel, but kind of not. It kind of is, but it's kind of not. So, around this point, he was, he was walking through a shopping mall when he spotted a male mannequin in a shop window. And he decided that he really wanted this mannequin because he thought that it's a lifeless thing that looks like a man. So he thought, this will help with my urges, with my weird sexual urges. And so one day he stole the mannequin and he basically just used it to lie next to it, stroke it, do weird things to it. Now, to be fair, I think he should have just kept the mannequin. If he would have kept the mannequin, this would have saved us so much more trouble. Should have just kept the mannequin. Because eventually, his grandma found the mannequin. She found it stuffed in his closet and demanded it that he threw it away. Ironically, it was stuffed in a closet. Yeah, so, hamster, probably not your thing. So, after she found it in the closet, she told him to throw it away. And he did. And this is when it gets a bit out of control. Literally, as soon as the mannequin gets thrown away, this is when he starts his whole thing. Like, the mannequin goes. So he's like, well, if the mannequin's not there, I might as well just start drugging people and murdering, basically. Mannequin goes, he ain't happy. Because in late 1985, he had become a regular at the bathhouses, which he later described as being relaxing places. But during his sexual encounters, he became frustrated at his partners moving during sex, so he didn't want them to move. So after he got arrested for indecent exposure, he stated, after his arrest, later on, he's been arrested so many times. After his arrest, he stated, I trained myself to view people as objects of pleasure instead of as people. And for this reason, beginning in June 1986, he administered sleeping pills to his partners, giving them liquor laced with the pills. He then waited for the people that he was sleeping with to fall asleep before raping them. To make sure he had a full supply of medication, Dahmer informed doctors he worked nights and required the tablets to adjust his body to working long hours. So around 12 such instances, the bathhouse administration revoked Dahmer's membership and he began to use hotel rooms to continue his behavior. Now, the reason why they didn't report any of this to the police and the reason why he wasn't arrested for any of this was because the relationship with the LGBT community and the Milwaukee police especially was so bad, it wouldn't have even gone anywhere, and it actually would have just revoked in the bathhouse losing business entirely, which the owners just didn't want to risk, apparently. And it would have probably revoked in them getting more trouble than Dahmer himself. So, that's the reason why it just was never reported. So, after his membership at the bathhouses was revoked, Dahmer read a report in the newspaper regarding the upcoming funeral. Now, this one's weird. This is all going to be weird, but this one is very weird. He read a report in a newspaper regarding the upcoming funeral of an 18-year-old man. So he came up with the idea of stealing the body of the guy and taking it home. But apparently when he went to go dig up the body, because it was fairly cold around this point, the ground was apparently too hard for him to dig up, so he gave up and went home. Pronoun check, she, her, thank you, Fluff. In August 1986, Dahmer was arrested for masturbating in the presence of two 12-year-old boys as he stood close to Kinnickinnick River. He initially admitted the offence and was again charged with indecent exposure, but quickly changed his story and claimed he had been merely just taking a piss, but he definitely wasn't, and said that he was unaware that there were two 12-year-old boys watching. I call bullshit. The charge was changed to disorderly conduct, and on the 10th of March 1987, Dahmer was sentenced to 1 year of probation with additional instructions he has to undergo counselling, which he barely went to, by the way. To be fair, he barely went to it, and they just never really checked up on him, so both doing things that they shouldn't be doing. Right now we're going to go into the second murder. This is when we actually just go into the murders now. So we've had the first murder, now we're going to go into the second murder. So his second victim was 24-year-old Stephen Tuomi. On the 15th of September 1987, 24-year-old Stephen Tuomi went missing after leaving his job at a restaurant in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So it's been quite a while. It's been a good few years since his first murder. He hadn't done anything. He hadn't killed anyone since then. So, like, the first one was in 1978. The second one is in 1987. So it's about 9 years, actually, since the previous murder, since the first murder. I mean, naturally, he'd done horrible things in between it, but it's been 9 years since he actually killed anyone. Now, this one's pretty much a weird one because he doesn't remember doing it. And I do believe that he doesn't remember doing it because he recalls all the other murders and tells what he did to each victim in extreme detail. So there's no need for him to not explain what happened to this victim. So I do genuinely believe that he was so drunk he just doesn't remember it to the day he died. I mean, there was no body. That's the reason why he didn't get caught. There was literally no body. So Stephen was a pretty normal guy. He had grown up in Ontario, Michigan, where he graduated from the local high school in 1987. On the 20th of November 1987, Dahmer at the time was living with his grandmother in West Allis, and he encountered Stephen Tuomi at a bar and persuaded him to return to the Ambassador Hotel in Milwaukee, where Dahmer had rented a room for the evening. According to Dahmer, he had no intention of murdering Tuomi, but rather intended to simply drug him and lay beside him as he explored his body. The following morning, however, Dahmer woke up to find Stephen lying beneath him on the bed, and his chest was crushed in, and he was black and blue with bruises. Blood was also seeping from the corner of his mouth, and Dahmer's first and one forearm was extensively bruised. Dahmer stated that he had no memory of having killed Tuomi, and later informed investigators that he could not believe this had happened. Which I genuinely believe, because he did a lot. His later murders would eventually get a lot more brutal than this. And he went into those ones with excruciating detail. So I genuinely think he did not ever remember it. I genuinely think that he didn't remember this at all. But he knows he did it. And he did plead guilty to it. But he doesn't know what exactly he did. So, to dispose of Stephen's body, Dahmer purchased a large suitcase. So he left the hotel, put a do not disturb sign on the door, hoping the maids would leave the room alone. Went and bought a suitcase, came back, and he put Stephen's body in the suitcase and got a taxi back to his grandmother's house. When he got into the taxi after the driver helped him put the suitcase into the boot of the car, the driver joked, "Oh, that's heavy. What, do you have a body in there?" And Dahmer just replied with, "Yeah, I do." And the driver was just like, "Oh, ha 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 ha, great bands, great bands." So at his grandmother's house, imagine if the maids had came in and saw it. Exactly. I mean, one fact, I'm sorry, I've only just remembered this. One fact about the first murder as well is that when he was taking, stuff to the trash and stuff like that, parts of, bits of the body that he couldn't really get rid of, when he was taking that to the trash chute, and to basically help dispose of all the bodies so there's no body left, he was actually pulled over by the police for speeding. And the police saw the bin bags in the back of the car when they pulled him over. And they were like, "What's in these bin bags?" And he was like, "Oh, it's just trash. My parents have been arguing. I wanted to leave the house. So my mum told me to take the trash out earlier. I never did it. So I just thought, oh, they're arguing. So I'm just going to go take the trash out." Which is quick thinking. And the police were like, "Oh, okay, that's fine. But the dump's closed right now. So you might as well just go back home." But if they would have looked inside those bags, this would never have happened. So at his grandmother's house, naturally he took the body there, and a week after the murder, he severed the head, so he kept the body there for a week. Would like to point out during that week he did do things to the body. He did things. So a week after the murder, he severed the head, arms, and legs from the torso. Then he stripped the bones from the body before cutting the flesh into pieces small enough to handle. He then placed the flesh inside plastic bin bags, and he wrapped the bones inside a sheet and pounded them into splinters with a sledgehammer. The entire dismemberment process took Dahmer around 2 hours to do, and he disposed of all of Stephen's remains, including the severed head, in the trash. He did want to try and keep the head, though. So he did, apparently there was a big bad smell coming from there. So he kept the head. So for 2 weeks after the murder, he kept Stephen's head wrapped in a blanket. And after 2 weeks, Dahmer boiled the head in a mixture of Soilex and bleach in an effort to retain the skull. He then used it to masturbate. Eventually, the skull was rendered too brittle by the bleaching process, so Dahmer destroyed it and disposed of it. So the third victim is James Doxtator. Following the murder of Stephen Tuomi, Dahmer began to actively seek victims now, so he decided to ignore resisting his urges and should just go for it. Hey, Milk! So most of his victims he met in a lot of the gay bars that he went to. He typically lured them to his grandmother's home. He would drug his victims, and before drugging them or afterwards, he would rape them. Well, he was living in his grandmother's house and he had the basement, so no one really kind of picked up on it, I guess. Like, his grandmother kind of just was like, oh, it's a bit stinky down there, Jeffrey, can you just clean down there? Miss you too, Milk. And that's basically it. So 2 months after Stephen's murder, Dahmer met 14-year-old sex worker James Dockstater. Dahmer lured James to his home with an offer of $50 to pose for nude pictures. Hey, gay vibes. At Dahmer's so he took him back to his grandmother's house. Both of them engaged in consensual sex, but it's still wrong, Jeffrey, because the boy is a minor. So Dahmer drugged James and strangled him on the floor of the basement. Dahmer left the body in the basement for 1 week before dismembering it in much of the same way that he did to Stephen. He placed all of James's remains, excluding the skull, so he wanted to keep the head, in the bin. He boiled the skull and initially retained it before pulverizing it. So basically, he wanted to masturbate with the skull, and then when he was done with it, he'd destroy it. And that's basically what he'd do at first. It eventually escalates to get into even worse stuff. The fourth victim is Richard Guerrero. On the 24th of March 1988, Dahmer met 22-year-old Richard Guerrero outside a gay bar called the Phoenix. Great advertising for that bar. Dahmer lured Richard to his grandmother's house, although the aim this time on this occasion was to give him $50 to simply spend the night with him. He then drugged Richard with sleeping pills and strangled him with a leather strap. When Dahmer then, I don't know how you do this, by the way. Like, are you hard when you die? Because Jeffrey then performed oral sex on Richard's body, which I don't get. He then dismembered Richard's body within 24 hours of his death, with the remains again disposed of in the bin, and the skull again kept behind before being pulverized several months later. On the 23rd of April, Dahmer lured another young man to his house. However, after giving his victim a drugged-up coffee, both him and the victim heard Dahmer's grandmother call, "Is that you, Jeff?" So she was still awake. The other times, she'd been asleep. This time, she was awake. So Dahmer replied in a way that let his grandmother know that he was on his own. All because of this, he decided not to kill this victim. Instead, he waited until he had fallen unconscious before taking him to the County General Hospital instead. Really? Interesting. Yeah, we'll get to that one, don't worry. Still weird. So in September 1988, Jeffrey's grandmother asked him to move out because of his habit of bringing young men to her house late at night and the foul smells coming from both the basement and the garage. So yeah, she could smell this shit. Dahmer found a one-bedroom apartment on North 25th Street and moved into his new home on the 25th of September. The following day, he was arrested for drugging and sexually assaulting a 13-year-old boy who he lured to his home on the pretext of posing for nude images. So yeah, he's a nonce. Lionel hired an attorney named Gerald Boyle to defend his son. At Boyle's request, Dahmer underwent a series of psychological evaluations prior to his upcoming court hearings. These evaluations revealed that Dahmer harbored deep feelings of alienation. A second evaluation 2 months later revealed Dahmer to be an impulsive individual, suspicious of others, and dismayed by his lack of accomplishments in life. His probation officer would also reference a 1987 diagnosis of Dahmer suffering from schizoid personality disorder. Oh, believe me, these are bad. In January 1989, Dahmer was convicted of second-degree sexual assault and of enticing a child for immoral purposes. Sentencing for the assault was suspended until May 1989. On the 20th of March, Dahmer commenced a 10-day Easter absence from work. During this time, he moved back into his grandmother's house. The next victim is Anthony Sears. So 2 months after his conviction and 2 months prior to his sentencing for sexual assault, Dahmer murdered his fifth victim. He was a 24-year-old aspiring model named Anthony Sears, who Dahmer met at a gay bar on the 25th of March 1989. According to Dahmer, on this particular occasion, he was not looking for a victim. However, shortly before closing at that time, Sears just started talking to him. Dahmer lured Anthony to his grandmother's home, where the pair engaged in consensual oral sex, before Dahmer drugged and strangled Anthony. I want to point out, most of those channel points I'm not doing during the true crime thing unless it's like hydrate or pronoun check or stuff like that. So the following morning, Dahmer placed Anthony's body in his grandmother's bathtub, where he decapitated the body before attempting to basically do the rest of his shit on it. He then stripped the flesh from the body and pulverized the bones, which were again disposed of in the trash. According to Dahmer, he found Anthony exceptionally attractive, and Anthony was the first victim who he permanently retained any body parts, so he didn't actually keep any of the body parts from Anthony. He preserved Anthony's head and genitalia, other than those two, in acetone and stored them in his work locker. So he kept his head and his genitals and put them in his work locker. So when he moved to his new home the following year, he took the remains with him. Cunt was dead. Cunt is dead. Cunt was. Did he use it as a dildo? I don't know, and I really don't want to know. On the 23rd of May 1989, Jeffrey Dahmer was sentenced to 5 years probation and 1 year in the House of Correction, with work released permitted in order that he be able to keep his job. He was also required to register as a sex offender. Mate, there's a few gay serial killers, you know. There's the Grinder Killer, there's Dennis Nielsen, there's a few. Yeah, he was closeted around his family, but then he was open everywhere else. When did this happen? 1980s to 1990s. So 2 months before his scheduled release from the work camp, Jeffrey Dahmer was paroled from this regime. His 5 years probation imposed in 1989 began at this point. On release, Dahmer temporarily moved back to his grandmother's home, and in May 1990, he moved into the Oxford Apartments, located on North 25th Street in Milwaukee. Although located in a high-crime area, the apartment was close to his workplace. It was furnished and he paid $300 per month, inclusive of all bills, excluding electricity, and was economical. Yeah, bitch, I do my research. His next victim, I hate how Ted Bundy is romanticized and sexualized, though. It's fucking horrible. Yep, I hate I fucking hate it. It doesn't help that Netflix, when they do their documentaries on these people, leave out most of the information. Like, you're not going to mention that Ted Bundy was a cannibal. Like, you tried to do that shit. You're not going to mention that he was a necrophiliac either. You're not going to mention the fact that he was a paedophile too. You're going to ignore that? Okay. Anyway, Dahmer. So within 1 week of him moving into his new apartment, he had killed his 6th victim. His 6th victim was 32-year-old sex worker Raymond Smith. He tried to, like, once, but still, I'm classing it 'cause he tried to. Which means that he had an interest and he was trying to make himself worse. Like, he knew what he was doing. So he met 32-year-old sex worker Raymond Smith, and he brought him to apartment 213 with the promise of $50 for sex. Inside the apartment, he gave Raymond a drink laced with 7 sleeping pills and manually strangled him to death. The following day, Jeffrey Dahmer purchased a Polaroid camera and he took several pictures of Raymond's body in suggestive positions before dismembering him in the bathroom. He boiled the legs, arms, and pelvis in a steel kettle with Soilex, which allowed him to then rinse the bones in his sink. Dahmer dissolved the remainder of Raymond's skeleton, excluding the skull, in a container filled with acid. He later spray painted the skull, which he placed alongside the skull of He then placed the skull basically next to his other victims upon a black towel inside a metal filing cabinet. He was collecting. It's fine to have a hobby, Jeffrey, but can it not be heads? So around a week, now this one makes me giggle. Because he fucked up. Around a week after the murder of Raymond Smith, on or around the 27th of May, Jeffrey lured another young man back to his apartment, but on this occasion, he accidentally drank the drug-laced drink himself. So when he woke up from his own drugged-out state, the following day, he found out that his intended victim had stolen several items of clothing, $300, and a watch. Get wrecked, Jeffrey. Get wrecked. His next victim was Edward Smith. So, in June 1990, Jeffrey Dahmer lured 27-year-old Edward Smith to his apartment. He drugged and strangled Edward, and on this occasion, rather than immediately acidifying the skeleton or repeating the previous process of bleaching, Dahmer placed Edward's skeleton in his freezer for several months in the hope it would not drain moisture. Freezing the skeleton did not remove moisture. The skeleton of Edward would be acidified. Several months later, Dahmer accidentally destroyed the skull when he placed it in the oven to dry. Jesus, Jeffrey. A process that caused the skull to actually explode. Dahmer himself, you look like one of the chicks you'd find in Satan's. Congratulations, because I am a chick that you'd probably find in Satan's, because I tend to go there. But I'm also curious, and if I already know you. Anyway. So, yeah, the head exploded. No problem, Matt. Thank you for being here anyway. So, Dahmer himself told the police later on that he had felt rotten about Edward's murder as he was unable to retain any parts of his body. Yeah, that's the part that makes you feel bad, Jeffrey, that he didn't manage to keep his head. Dickhead. His next victim was Ernest Miller. So less than 3 months after Edward's murder, Dahmer met 22-year-old Chicago native Ernest Miller on the corner of North 27th Street. Ernest agreed to accompany Dahmer to his apartment for $50 and further agreed to allow him to listen to his heart and stomach. He's literally letting you do it, dude. You didn't have to escalate this shite. When Dahmer attempted to perform oral sex on him, he was informed that will cost you extra. And this is when Dahmer gave his intended victim a drink laced with 2 sleeping pills. On this occasion, Dahmer had only given him 2 sleeping pills to his victim. He killed Ernest by slashing his carotid artery with the same knife he used to dissect his victims' bodies. Ernest bled to death within minutes, and Dahmer then posed the body for various suggestive Polaroid pictures before placing the body in his bathtub for dismemberment. Dahmer repeatedly kissed and talked to the severed head while he dismembered the remainder of the body. How about you don't? Dahmer wrapped Ernest's heart, biceps, and portions of the flesh from the legs in plastic bags and placed them in the fridge for later consumption, to basically eat them. I don't know. He probably laid some things down, if I'm being honest with you. He boiled the remaining flesh and organs into a jelly-like substance using Soilex, which again enabled him to rinse the flesh of the skeleton, which he intended to retain. To preserve the skeleton, Dahmer placed the bones in a light bleach solution for 24 hours before allowing them to dry upon a cloth for 1 week. The severed head was initially placed in the fridge before also being stripped of flesh, then painted and coated with enamel. The next victim is David Thomas. 3 weeks after the murder of Ernest Miller, on the 24th September, Jeffrey Dahmer encountered a 22-year-old man named David Thomas at the Grand Avenue Mall and persuaded him to return to his apartment for a few drinks. With additional money on offer, he would pose for photographs like the other victims, and in his statement to police after his arrest, Dahmer stated that after giving David a drink laced with sedatives, he did not feel attracted to him, but was afraid to allow him to wake up in case he would be angry over being drugged. Therefore, he strangled him and dismembered and did the whole dismemberment process and retained these photographs that he took of him, which basically later helped in his identification, really. After this murder, Dahmer did not kill anyone for almost 5 whole months. We ain't anywhere near done yet, I'm just saying. When I said, this is gonna be a long one, I wasn't joking. The next murder is Curtis Straughter. In February 1991, Dahmer observed a 17-year-old Curtis Straughter standing at a bus stop near Marquette University. According to Dahmer, he lured Curtis into his apartment with an offer of money for posing for nude photos, with the additional with possibly the idea of having sex later on. Dahmer drugged Curtis, cuffed his hands behind his back, and then strangled him to death with a leather strap. He then dismembered Chris, retaining his skull, hands, and genitals, and photographing each stage of dismemberment. Of course, this was the first one that I fucking read about, isn't it? Of all the serial killers to start off with, I started off with Dahmer. The next victim is Errol Lindsay. Less than 2 months later, on the 7th of April 1991, Dahmer met 19-year-old Errol Lindsay walking to get a key cut. Lindsay was straight, and Dahmer lured Lindsay to his apartment where he drugged him. Now this is the bit of information where most people go, oh, that guy. He drilled a hole into his skull and poured hydrochloric acid into it. And according to Dahmer, Errol woke up after this experiment saying, I have a headache, what time is it? In reply to this, Dahmer again drugged Errol, then strangled him. He decapitated Errol and retained his skull. He then played around with his body, and he also skinned him, placed the skin in a solution of cold water and salt for several weeks in the hope of permanently retaining it. He disposed of his skin when he noticed it had become too frayed and brittle. If I mention Jeffrey Dahmer to anyone, the first thing that makes them go, they're like, which one was he again? I'm like, oh, the one that drilled into the skulls and poured acid into it. And they're like, oh, him. Like, they remember him from that bit. By 1991, fellow residents of the Oxford apartments had complained a lot to the building manager after smelling foul smells coming from apartment 213, in addition to the sounds of falling objects and the occasional sound of a chainsaw. The building manager did contact Dahmer in response to these complaints on several occasions, although Dahmer basically just said that his fridge was broken and he was intending to fix it, and on another occasion he said that he had tropical fish that had just recently died, and that's what the smell is. But apparently that worked, and the building manager pretty much just left him alone. You need to bear with me with this next one, because I'm hoping I pronounce his name correctly. His next victim was Conorak Synthesophone. Okay. If I say that wrong, I apologize. On the afternoon of the 26th of May 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer encountered a 14-year-old teenager named Conorak Synthesophone on Wisconsin Avenue. By coincidence, Conorak was the younger brother of a boy that Dahmer had molested in 1988. He approached the boy with an offer of money to accompany him to his apartment to pose for Polaroid pictures. So remember when I mentioned that 13-year-old that he basically molested? It's his brother. According to Jeffrey Dahmer, Conorak was initially reluctant to the idea before changing his mind and going with Dahmer to his apartment, where he posed for 2 pictures in his underwear before Dahmer drugged him into unconsciousness and performed oral sex on him. Basically, that's rape, and he raped him, basically. If they're unconscious and you're performing any kind of sexual act on a person, it's rape. And just want to say that it is. If they're not consented, then it's rape. On this occasion, he drilled a single hole into his skull, though he had injected hydrochloric acid into the frontal lobe. Before he fell unconscious, Dahmer led the boy into his bedroom, where the body of 31-year-old Tony Hughes, who Dahmer had already killed 3 days earlier, lay naked on the floor. Dahmer thinks Conorak saw the body but didn't react to it, probably because of the effect of the sleeping pills that he just digested, and also the hydrochloric acid that had been screwed into his brain, literally. He fell unconscious, and Dahmer drank several beers while laying alongside him before leaving his apartment to drink at a bar and then to buy more alcohol. In the early morning hours of the 27th of May, Dahmer returned to his apartment to discover Conorak was sitting naked on the corner of 25th Street, the corner of 25th and State, talking in his own language, talking in his native language, with 3 distressed young women standing near him. Dahmer approached the women and told them that Conorak was his boyfriend and attempted to lead him back to his apartment by the arm. However, these 3 ladies weren't having this. Basically, these 3 ladies actually had recognized Conorak already. They'd seen him before in his school uniform, and they'd seen him before heading on the school bus before, so they knew that he was a minor. They were very much aware that he was a minor. Considering they'd actually only seen him fairly recently as well, so they definitely knew. They told Jeffrey that they'd already called 911 and the police would be here shortly. And eventually, before he knew it, 3 police officers arrived at the scene. And bear in mind, I also want to point out, these 3 women were people that were black, and we know what the police can be like. So the police refused to listen to anything the women were saying. The women were saying the boy had clearly been drugged, there was something not right with him, and he needs to go to hospital, and he's clearly not safe and should not be with Jeffrey. The police told the women to butt out and leave this to the men to handle and to go away. They looked at Jeffrey for an explanation to the issue, and Jeffrey explained that this was his boyfriend, who was 19 years old. Sorry. So yeah, Jeffrey said that this was his boyfriend who was 19 years old. They'd had a little bit of an issue, had a bit of a fight, so he left the apartment, and that's the reason why Cognac is waiting outside, just for him. And he doesn't speak much English, but they just had a little bit of a spat, and that's about it. The police officers believed him, told the women to leave them alone and go away, and took Cognac and Jeffrey back to Jeffrey's apartment. They went into the apartment and did notice that there was a weird smell coming from inside the apartment, but they didn't really go inside. They left Jeffrey with the young boy and said, "We apologise for the disturbance and the women's behaviour. Have a good night." And left the young boy with his vengeful murderer. So after the officers left the apartment, Dahmer again injected hydrochloric acid into his brain, and on the second occasion the injection proved fatal, and the following day, on the 28th of May, Dahmer took a day off from work to devote himself to the dismemberment of the bodies in his apartment, and he kept both of the victims' skulls. You'll be fine, Milk. I bet you'll be fine. I bet you'll be fine. But love you too. So, this is another time where the police would have just gone into the fucking apartment. They would have seen the other dead body in the fucking room. But if they would have listened to the women, then this would have been stopped. But no, this just carried on and on and on. The next victim is Matt Turner. On the 30th of June, Dahmer travelled to Chicago, where he met 20-year-old Matt Turner at a bus station. Turner accepted Dahmer's offer to travel to Milwaukee for a professional photo shoot. At the apartment, Dahmer drugged and strangled and dismembered Turner and placed his head and internal organs in separate plastic bags in the freezer, and Matt was not reported missing. Milk, that's completely fine. Do want to remind you though, this is going to YouTube, so if you're not comfortable with that, I just want to let you know. The next victim is Jeremiah Weinberger. On the 5th of July, Dahmer lured 23-year-old Jeremiah from a Chicago bar to his apartment on the promise of spending the weekend with him. He drugged Jeremiah and twice injected boiling water through his skull, sending him into a coma from which he died 2 days later. The next victim is Oliver Lacey. On the 15th of July, Dahmer encountered 24-year-old Oliver Lacey at the corner of 27th and Kilbourne. Lacey agreed to Dahmer's offer of posing nude for photographs and accompanied him to his apartment, where the pair had sex before Dahmer drugged Oliver. And on this occasion, Dahmer intended to prolong the time he spent while Oliver stayed alive. After unsuccessfully attempting to render Oliver unconscious with chloroform, he phoned his workplace to request a day off from work. This was allowed, although the very next day he did get suspended. After strangling Oliver, Dahmer raped the body before dismembering him. He also placed Oliver's head and heart in the fridge and his skeleton in the freezer. I want to know how big this fridge freezer is. I want to know how big it is, because this is fucking insane. I think there is pictures of it, but I'd rather not look. The next victim is Joseph Braidhoft. 4 days later, on the 19th of July, Dahmer lured 25-year-old Joseph to his apartment. Joseph was strangled and left lying on Dahmer's bed, covered in a sheet for 2 days. On the 21st of July, Dahmer removed these sheets to find the head covered in maggots. Shows you how rancid that apartment must have been. He then decapitated the body, cleaned the head, and placed it in the fridge. He later acidified Joseph's torso along with those of 2 other victims killed within the previous months. So, those are all of the murders. Want to point out. We are now going to go into the capture of Jeffrey Dahmer. Before we do that, I'm going to quickly run to the toilet, and I will be back in a very quick moment. She returns. So, now we're on to the capture of Jeffrey Dahmer. I'm going to pour some more of my beer for this. Or the rest of it. It's a big bottle, to be fair. Panda, you may want to turn down your mic sensitive. How about why? It's a bit much. That's fine. Well, A, that's fine, and thanks for being the first person to ever let me know. But oh well. However, we digress, because we are now onto how he got captured and how his little reign of terror all came to end. On the 22nd of July, 1991, Jeffrey approached 3 men with an offer of $100 to accompany him to his apartment to pose for nude photographs, drink beer, and simply keep him company. Only one of the 3, 32-year-old Tracy Edwards, agreed to come back to his apartment. When entering Dahmer's apartment, Edwards noticed a foul smell and several boxes of hydrochloric acid on the floor, which Dahmer claimed was used for cleaning bricks. After some minor conversation, Edwards responded to Dahmer's request to turn his head and view his tropical fish, whereupon Dahmer placed a handcuff on his wrist. When Edwards asked what's happening, Dahmer unsuccessfully attempted to cuff his wrists together. Then he told Edwards to accompany him to the bedroom to pose for nude pictures. While inside the bedroom, Edwards noticed nude male posters on the wall, and a videotape of The Exorcist, of Exorcist 3 was playing. Bit sinister. He also noted a blue 57-gallon drum in the corner from which a strong odor came from it. Dahmer then brandished a knife and informed Edwards he intended to take nude pictures of him. In an attempt to appease Dahmer, Edwards unbuttoned his shirt, saying that he would allow him to do so if he would remove the handcuffs and put the knife away. basically, in response to this, Dahmer simply turned his attention towards the TV, and Edwards observed Dahmer rocking back and forth and chanting before turning his attention back to him. Dude, creepy. He then placed his head on Edward's chest, listened to his heartbeat with the knife pressed against his intended victim, informed Edwards he intended to eat his heart. In continuous attempts to prevent Dahmer from attacking him, Edwards repeated that he was Dahmer's friend and that he was not going to run away. Edwards had decided he was going to either jump from a window or run through the unlocked front door upon the next available opportunity. When Edwards next stated he needed to use the bathroom, he asked if they could sit with a beer in the living room where there was air conditioning. Dahmer said, yeah, that's fine, and both of them walked to the living room when Edwards left the bathroom. Inside the living room, Edwards waited until he observed Dahmer having a momentary lapse of concentration before requesting to use the bathroom again. When Edwards rose from the couch, he noted Dahmer was not holding the handcuffs, and Edwards punched him in the face, knocking Dahmer off balance and ran out the front door. At 11:30 p.m. on the 22nd of July, Edwards flagged down two Milwaukee police officers, Robert Rath, and Rolf Mueller at the corner of North 25th Street. The officers noted Edward had a handcuff attached to his wrist, whereupon he explained to the officers that a freak had placed the handcuffs on him and asked if the police could remove them. When the officers' handcuff keys failed to fit the brand of handcuffs, Edward agreed to accompany the officers to the apartment, where Edward stated he had spent the previous 5 hours before escaping. So the officers and Edward arrived at the apartment. Dahmer invited all of them inside and acknowledged he had indeed placed the handcuffs on Edwards, although he offered no explanation as to why he had done so. At this point, Edwards said to the officers that Dahmer had also showed a large knife on him and that this happened in the bedroom. Dahmer made no comment to this at all, indicating that to one of the officers that the key to the handcuffs was in his bedside dresser. Hopefully they're not real skulls, Flu. Mueller entered the bedroom and Dahmer attempted to pass Mueller to himself, retrieved the key, where the second officer said to back off. In the bedroom, Mueller noted there was indeed a large knife beneath the bed. He also saw an open drawer which, upon closer inspection, contained sources of Polaroid pictures, many of which were of human bodies in various stages of dismemberment. He noted the decor indicated that they had been taken in this very same apartment that they were in. He also walked into the living room to show them to his partner, uttering the words, "These are for real." When Dahmer saw that Mueller was holding several of his Polaroids, he fought with the officers in an attempt to resist arrest. The officers quickly overpowered him, cuffed his hands behind his back, and called a second squad car for backup. At this point, Mueller opened the refrigerator to reveal the freshly severed head of a black male on the bottom shelf. As Dahmer lay pinned on the floor beneath one of the officers, he turned his head towards the officers and muttered the words, "For what I did, I should be dead." A more detailed search of the apartment conducted by the Milwaukee's Police Criminal Investigation revealed a total of 4 severed heads in Dahmer's kitchen. A total of 7 skulls, some painted, some bleached, were found in Dahmer's bedroom and inside a closet. In addition, investigators discovered collected blood drippings upon a tray in the bottom of Dahmer's refrigerator, plus 2 human hearts and a portion of arm muscle, each wrapped inside plastic bags upon the shelves. In Dahmer's freezer, investigators discovered an entire torso plus a bag of human organs and flesh stuck to the ice at the bottom. Elsewhere in apartment 213, investigators discovered 2 entire skeletons, a pair of severed hands, 2 severed and preserved penises, a mummified scalp, and in the 57-gallon drum, 3 further dismembered torsos dissolving in acid solution. A total of 74 Polaroid pictures detailing the dismemberment of Dahmer's victims were found. In reference to the recovery of the body parts and artifacts at 924 North 25th Street, the chief medical examiner later stated it was more like dismantling someone's museum than an actual crime scene. There are actually pictures of the team bringing out the various bits of evidence, including the fridge and the freezer. Beginning in the early hours of the 23rd of July, my birthday, in 1991, Dahmer was questioned by Detective Patrick Kennedy as to the murders he had committed and the evidence found at his apartment. Over the following 2 weeks, Kennedy and later Detective Dennis Murphy conducted numerous interviews with Dahmer, which then combined totaled over 60 hours. Dahmer waived his right to have a lawyer present throughout these interrogations, adding he wished to confess to all he had done. He said he created this horror, and it only makes sense. I do everything to put an end to it. He readily admitted to having murdered 16 young men in Wisconsin since 1987, and one further victim, Stephen Hicks, killed in Ohio back in 1978. On the 25th of July 1991, Dahmer was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, and by August 22nd, he had been charged with a further 11 murders committed in Wisconsin. On the 14th of September, investigators in Ohio, having uncovered hundreds of bone fragments in the woodland behind the address in which Dahmer had confessed to killing his first victim, formally identified 2 molars and a vertebra with X-ray records of Hicks. 3 days later, Dahmer was charged by authorities in Ohio with Stephen Hicks' murder. Dahmer was not charged with the attempted murder of Edwards, nor with the murder of Tuomi. He was not charged with Tuomi's murder because the Milwaukee County District Attorney only brought charges where murder could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And Dahmer had no memory of actually committing this particular murder, for which no physical evidence of the crime existed. At a scheduled preliminary hearing on the 13th of January 1992, Dahmer pleaded guilty but insane to 15 counts of murder. We are now going to go into the trial, and then it goes into the aftermath, okay? So Dahmer's trial began on the 30th of January 1992. He was tried in Milwaukee for the 15 counts of first-degree murder before Judge Lawrence Graham. By pleading guilty on the 13th of January to the charges brought against him, Dahmer had waived his rights to an initial trial to establish guilt. This, debated by opposing counsels at Dahmer's trial, was to determine whether he suffered from either a mental or personality disorder, the prosecution claiming that any disorders did not deprive Dahmer of the ability to appreciate the criminality of his conduct or to deprive him of the ability to resist his impulses. The defense, arguing that Dahmer suffered from a mental disease, was driven by obsessions and impulses he was able to control. Basically, he ain't insane, dude. Defense experts argued that Dahmer was insane due to his necrophilic drive, his compulsion to have sexual intercourse with corpses. Defense expert Dr. Fred Berlin testified that Dahmer was unable to conform his conduct at the time that he committed the crimes because he was suffering from paraphilia, or more specifically, necrophilia. But Dr. Judith Becker, a professor of psychiatry and psychology, was the second expert witness for the defense. Becker also diagnosed Dahmer with necrophilia. The final defense expert to testify, forensic psychiatrist Dr. Carl Wallstrom, diagnosed Dahmer with necrophilia, borderline personality disorder, psychopathical personality disorder, alcohol dependence, and psychotic disorder. Dude's got a lot of disorders. Prosecution rejected the defense's argument that Dahmer was insane. And the final witness to appear for the prosecution, forensic psychiatrist Park Diaz, began his testimony on February 12th. Diaz testified that he did not believe Dahmer was to be suffering from any mental disease or defect at the time that he committed the crimes, stating Dahmer went into great lengths to be alone with his victim and to have no witnesses. True. So, Following the defense counsel's 75-minute closing argument, Michael McCann delivered his closing argument for the prosecution, describing Dahmer as a sane man in full control of his actions who simply strove to avoid detection. McCann described Dahmer as a calculating individual who killed to control his victims and retain their bodies merely to afford himself a prolonged period of sexual pleasure. Fucking true. McCann argued that by pleading guilty but insane to the charges, Dahmer was seeking to escape responsibility for his crimes. On the 15th of February, the court reconvened to hear the verdict. Dahmer was ruled to be sane and not suffering from a mental disorder at the time of each of the 15 murders for which he was tried, although in each court, 2 of the 12 jurors signified their dissent. Formal sentencing was postponed until the 17th of February, and on this date, Dahmer's attorney announced his client wished to address the court. Dahmer then approached the stand and read from a statement prepared by himself and his defense as he faced the judge. We need to point out the families of the victims were present during the trial, which, don't know about you. Oh god, that could have been like the worst thing on the planet. It must have been like fucking difficult. In his statement, Dahmer said that he had never desired freedom following his arrest and that he frankly wished for his own death. He further stressed that none of his murders had been motivated by hatred and that he understood that nothing he said or did could undo the terrible harm he had caused to the families of his victims and the city of Milwaukee, and that he and his doctors believed his criminal behaviour had been motivated by mental disorders. Dahmer added that this medical knowledge had given him some peace, and although he understood that society would never forgive him, he hoped God would. Dahmer closed his statement with the following: "I know my time in prison will be terrible, but I deserve whatever I get because of what I have done. Thank you, Your Honor, and I am prepared for your sentence, which I know will be the maximum. I ask for no consideration." He then returned to his seat to await formal sentencing. Dahmer was then sentenced to life imprisonment plus 10 years upon the first 2 counts, with the remaining 13 counts carrying a mandatory sentencing of life imprisonment plus 70 years. The death penalty was not an option for Judge Graham to consider at the penalty phase, as Wisconsin had abolished capital punishment in 1853. Upon hearing of Jeffrey's sentencing, his father Lionel and stepmother Shari requested to be allowed a 10-minute private meeting with their son before he was transferred to the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage to begin his sentence. This request was granted and the trio exchanged hugs and well wishes before Jeffrey was escorted away. 3 months after his conviction in Milwaukee, Dahmer was extradited to Ohio to be tried for the murder of his first victim, Stephen Hicks. In a court hearing lasting just 45 minutes, Dahmer again pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to a 16th term of life imprisonment on the 1st of May 1992. And this is the end of it. So on the morning of the 28th of November 1994, Dahmer left his cell to conduct his assigned work detail, accompanying him with 2 fellow inmates, Jesse Anderson and Christopher Scarver. The trio were left unsupervised in the showers of the prison gym for approximately 20 minutes, and at 10 past 8 a.m, Dahmer was discovered on the floor of the bathrooms of the gym suffering from extreme head wounds. He had been severely bludgeoned about the head and face with a 20-inch, or if you're anywhere else in the world, 51-centimeter metal bar. His head had also been repeatedly struck against the wall within the assault. Although Dahmer was still alive and rushed to a nearby hospital, he was pronounced dead 1 hour later. Anderson had also been beaten with the same instrument and died 2 days later from his wounds. And that's it. That is Jeffrey Dahmer. That is the tale. That is the story of Jeffrey Dahmer. As clearly disgusting of a guy he is, that's it. And I hope you enjoyed that segment of Jeffrey Dahmer on today's True Crime Friday. I will stay live on stream. This has been an hour and 40 minutes of this fucked up shit. I will be staying live on Twitch, however, like I normally do, for a bit longer after True Crime Fridays, just to hang out for a bit with everyone. Next week's True Crime Fridays, we'll be covering the case of Edmund Kemper, so that one's going to be interesting. So next week is Edmund Kemper. If you did not see on my Twitter, I have put through the next few weeks of True Crime Fridays, basically for all of you. So next week is Edmund Kemper. Then after that, so Friday the 2nd of July, we are covering Edmund Kemper, and Friday the 9th of July, we are covering Peter Tobin. And then after that, there will be no True Crime Friday for the week after, because I will not be here on that day. But after that, so after Peter Tobin, is the 12-hour stream, which means it's the case of Charles Manson and the Manson family. Big fucking one. And I'm reading like 2 books at the same time on the dude. So, yeah. Fun. So if you're on YouTube, if you're watching this on YouTube, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and also check out the Twitch channel to watch this live or whatever you want to do. So for YouTube, I'll see you later, and for Twitch, we're going to carry on.